Welcome to the Tuesday, November 9th, 2021 Finance Committee meeting. I'll call the meeting to order and I will conduct roll call in the order I see you on the screen. When I say your name, say present, please. Dan Schultz.
Present.
David Cohen.
Present.
Julie Haywood.
Present.
Jenny Lohman.
Present.
Bill England.
Present.
Charles Burdell Williams.
Present.
Pam Henry.
Present.
And the next item on the agenda is approval of the minutes. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes of the last Finance Committee meeting?
So moved. It was paid.
Second.
Second, Charles Burdell Williams.
All in favor?
Aye.
Mr. Fishbein,
There's a
I have a-
question.
Oh, you have a question?
just as similar to the finance, I was wondering if we could consider adding a link to either the summary, which also links to the video, or to the video itself of the Finance Committee meeting that was held and added to the minutes.
I will note for the record, Mr. Schultz's long-term advocacy of transparency of our meetings. And
In the spirit of Ms. Thompson, yeah. Exactly.
And I will ask administration to include that in this set of minutes and all future minutes, so that there will be access to the videos of these meetings. Dr. Scriven, you raised your hand. Oh, thumbs up. Okay, with that, I'll call the vote. All in favor of approving the minutes as amended?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Hearing none, that passes. And I will now turn the meeting over to Mr. Linderman for his presentation.
Okay, if you can see the Finance Committee meeting slide there, I'm hoping you can. We're going to jump right to the agenda. The first thing on the agenda, we have with us on the panel, we have Allison Elliott. She's the assistant township manager. Is that correct, Allison, for Cheltenham Township? They actually had sent something to Dr. Hacker month or two ago. We're going to try and do this LERTA presentation on the October agenda. Something happened and it didn't come through. They weren't able to add it to the agenda, weren't ready. I don't know, for whatever reason. It's on tonight, and I'm going to actually turn it over to her for an explanation of number one, what LERTA is. I'm a little familiar with LERTA. We talked about this when I was helping with Coatesville, one of the townships that Cowan Township did LERTA, and actually the city of Coatesville had LERTA too. So Allison, I will stop sharing my screen at this point, and then you can go ahead and share yours.
Great, thank you very much. Let's see. Sharing everything else. There we go. Okay. Well, again, thank you so much for allowing me the opportunity to talk about a LERTA proposal for Cheltenham. I'm not sure how familiar you all are, so this is a fairly detailed presentation to kind of help try to answer as many questions as you might have for this. So if you have heard this all before, just let me know and I will skip around. But Cheltenham Township had passed a LERTA ordinance that, back in 2005. So there was one that was in place. It is an ordinance that needs to be passed by all three taxing bodies. So the township, the school district, and the county. And it in the time that it was in effect, it had not been used. And then we had somebody who wanted to use the ordinance, and it was found that it was not actually adopted properly by all three bodies. So the township was in the process of updating the ordinance anyway. So we're now looking to kind of provide you with an ordinance that is similar, but a little bit different as well from the previous ordinance. So there is not currently one in effect, even though you may have heard a presentation back in 2005. I'm not sure how many of you were on the board at that point, but so this will kind of explain the LRTA and some of the differences between what was in effect in the past and where we're going. So basically, LRTA, we're looking to utilize this to help meet the economic development goals of the township, which is basically, in a nutshell, to expand the tax base in the township by incentivizing new development, expansion, redevelopment, and rehabilitation of existing properties, and then providing housing, employment opportunities, retail, dining, and other entertainment options in the township to make basically Cheltenham a really great place to live, work, and play. In the recent times, we have done a number of economic development initiatives in the township. We have also worked with the school district on some of them as well. So we've done a number of streetscape improvements over the past, I'd say, decade and a half in Glenside and Elkins Park West commercial districts. We've adopted a comprehensive zoning ordinance and map update to help incentivize new developments in the township. We've worked with the school district and the county to do a tax increment financing scenario for the Elkins Estate project that is currently under construction. And we in 2020 adopted a new subdivision and land development ordinance to help guide development in the township. Currently, so we're working on this LRTA, and we're doing a multi-year comprehensive plan update. All of these have been fairly collaborative, and we're looking to collaborate again with the school district and county to implement this effort. So the big question is, what is a LRTA? Basically, it stands for Local Economic Revitalization Tax Assistance, and it was enabled to the municipalities by the state in 1977. And basically, it allows local tax authorities to provide an abatement for up to 10 years, but it could be less, on construction improvements on a property. And it's basically used as an economic development tool to allow people to do development that they may not have done if it wasn't for this. It has been a fairly common tool, as Mr. Linderman had mentioned, that he had worked with another community that had done this, and there are a number of communities surrounding Cheltenham and in the county that also have LRTA districts. And it is something that must be adopted by all the taxing authorities within that municipality in order to take effect. So in Cheltenham, it needs to be the township, school district, and county. So basically it works by only applying to the increase in the assessed value of the property from the new improvements. So if you have a blank piece of land and a property owner is paying a tax on just the land and they want to build a new building, they will continue to pay that tax on the land that they have been paying, and the abatement only goes on the new assessed value for the property or for the construction of the new building. If they're adding onto a building, the building plus the land will still be paid for, so there will be no reduction in the taxes. And then the increased assessed value on that addition will be abated during that period. And the township can choose how much of the abatement is applied and for how long. So the township's previous abatement was for 5 years. We're looking to be more competitive and expanding it out to 10 years. And you can do anything from a full 100% abatement for the full 10 years. Most municipalities do about 10% each year, so it'll start at 100% abatement of the new improved value, all the way down to say 10 to 0 during that period. And basically, it helps to make municipalities like Cheltenham more attractive to developers, where they may be considering 2 properties and we have an abatement and somebody else doesn't. hopefully they would choose Cheltenham. So how do the properties qualify for an abatement? Well, first, it is not for every single parcel in Cheltenham. They must be located within the 9 designated commercial districts in the township. Previously, it was in 5 commercial districts, and we've expanded it to 9, so adding 4 more based on our new zoning. So the new zoning allowed for some more commercial development within the township, so we're just kind of allowing the LRTA to go apply to those areas so that it will help incentivize the development we're looking for based on the new zoning ordinance in those areas. It also may only be applied to commercial or non-residential properties or mixed use. And those mixed uses require commercial uses on the ground floor and residential on the top. So it will not apply to any purely residential development in the township. And it can be used for rehabilitation, expansion, new construction. And basically it works once a project is approved, say through the land development process, the applicant will apply for the abatement through our planning and zoning department during the building permit process, and then they forward it on to the county assessment board, who does the analysis to determine, you know, what that increased assessed value is on the improvements, and then it's applied to the future tax year. Some of the ordinance that we had looked at had a minimum value on what kind of improvement would qualify, and really I think it's going to be kind of an analysis based on, you know, whether or not the developer just feels that it is worth it. So, and I have a few scenarios that kind of shows how it would look to give you a general idea. I'll just go through some of what the areas look like. We have in each of the 9 districts. Glenside Commercial District is one of the existing districts. It's basically the Easton Road corridor, Glenside Avenue, Limekiln Pike, Rice's Mill Road. There's about almost 300 parcels that are eligible in the LRTA district. The existing commercial districts we have in Cheltenham Village, which is the yellow, Elkins Park East, which I think is the orange, west is purple, and at the bottom is green and kind of the light blue is East Cheltenham District. And basically we have about 300 parcels in Cheltenham Village that are eligible. We'll say not all of them are eligible because some of those are purely residential, but in that corridor, that's how many parcels are eligible. Elkins Park East, about 67, also in East Cheltenham, and Elkins Park, 64 eligible parcels. We're adding the Lamont, Succonew, Wyncote, and West Cheltenham commercial districts, which these aren't super large areas, but there are opportunities for some larger parcels where we think development could be incentivized. So all in all, we have about 850 parcels that could qualify for the LRTA. Total assessed value of the eligible parcels within these districts is about $283 million. It covers the gamut of the zoning districts, but again, it's eligible only commercial or mixed-use residential properties are eligible for this. And again, it's purely our commercial enhancement districts. We are proposing, a slide abatement period in the first and second year would be 100% of the improved assessed value of the property or the improvements, and then it'd be 10% reduction each year, at 80% the third year, all the way down to 0 at year 11. So they would be paying 100% in year 11 of the increased value plus the previous value. And what it would look like, generally speaking, in that 283 million assessed value, kind of broke it down a little bit, and this is just a rough estimate. I can't guarantee that we would be seeing these numbers. Like I said, in the previous iteration of the ordinance, we did not have any applications for an abatement, I think largely because it really wasn't promoted. And we have one property owner that is looking to get into this next ordinance. So we do have one person, but I don't know how many people would do this. And I think it'll just be dependent on whether they think this is, a benefit to them. And some developers will say, I'm coming in and I really don't need the abatement. So basically for the school district to look at your numbers. So currently these areas are generating $14.5 million with an increase of 5%, be about $722,000, and with a 10% increase in value, about $1.4 million additional dollars for the school district. We're hoping it will work and bring in additional dollars, but it won't. Basically, the assessment is it will not hurt putting this in, but it may hopefully will potentially help each of the taxing bodies. And we just looked at kind of just an analysis of the assessed value by commercial district. Glenside it has the greatest assessed value in the township, and there's a lot of opportunity, I think, for expansion and development in this district. And if you look at some of our smaller ones, Tokenie, Wyncote, maybe there's not a ton of opportunity, but maybe all it takes is one large development to jump that revenue up pretty significantly. So it's just, like I said, did a number of just examples. These are very rough numbers, but I looked at an example of a renovation, which is basically, a property that's looking at an assessed value of $1 million. They're paying about $65,000 in taxes a year on that. And as you can see in the left-hand column, that $65,000 a year is consistent throughout the abatement period. So in this scenario, someone is investing about $300,000. Maybe they're doing an addition on this property. And if they were to do that addition without an abatement, it would yield an additional $19,000 a year in taxes for a total of $84,000 a year in taxes. So they did an analysis and they said, you know what, I think we would like to do this with the abatement. It sounds great. This is the incentive. We need to do this. And over that 10-year period, they'll pay an additional $84,000 in taxes. And also save themselves $110,000, or approximately a third of the improvements that they have made. But as you can see, at the end of the day, the township is going to be adding about $20,000 a year in taxes on this. And then looking at kind of the smaller renovation, someone says, I have a $100,000 property. Maybe it's a small retail property. I'm going to just do some facade improvements, or I don't know, something very small that would increase the assessed value at $15,000. They take their $6,500 annual tax, that remains stable, and it increases their tax rate every year by about $1,000. And as you can see, over that period, if they apply for the abatement, they're going to, the township and the school district and the county will receive an additional $4,000 worth of taxes over that 10-year period and then the property owner will save about $5,500 in taxes. And again, there's a bit more money in the coffers. Where I think the biggest analysis or the biggest benefit is looking at some of these bigger properties where someone has the raw land at $100,000. They do a major construction, maybe it's an employment center or a big mixed-use center. They put $3 million worth of improvements on that land. As you can see, that $6,500 tax remains stable for the 10 years as the base rate, but that improvement over that 10 years, the taxing authorities would bring in $843 additional dollars in taxes. The property owner saves about $1 million, again, about a third of the improvement. And the increase is from a $6,500 annual tax to about a $200,000 tax at the end of the period. So who knows, that development may have come in or maybe it wouldn't without that tax abatement. So, the question is why should we do this? And I think what it does is it allows the township to compete with neighboring municipalities for new investment to expand its tax base. It incentivizes current property owners to make the improvements to enhance the desirability of the community, and in home ownership, entrepreneurship, business attraction, job creation, increases investment in the township and our commercial and mixed use districts for jobs, business and job opportunities, that will hopefully increase other taxes such as business privilege, earned income, local service tax revenues, and also hopefully make the township a better place to live and work, which would increase our residential properties. And also it will hopefully help the township achieve that vision that was implemented into the zoning ordinance a little bit more quickly. And then that's really all I have for my presentation, but I am happy to answer any questions because I threw a lot at you pretty quickly, and then talk about kind of the next steps.
Thank you, Allison. First, we had a question in the chat. Can we get a copy of this presentation, please, so that we can review it more closely?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay.
And I can send you a copy of the proposed ordinance as well if you want to see it in more detail.
Great. And if you could send that to schoolboard@cheltenham.org, we'll all get it.
Great.
Thank you. I'll open it to, I think this is a good place to stop. We go back and forth in these meetings as to whether we ask questions at the end, but certainly here we should ask questions now. The first hand raised that I see is Mr. England. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Fishbein, and Ms. Elliott. Thank you for your presentation. I did get to see the ordinance that you had shared with Dr. Hacker. You had sent a letter that had some attachments. I got to see that this afternoon, but I have a few questions here that I don't have an answer to yet from reading that and seeing your presentation, but let me just put these out there as I try to understand what we're talking about here. So you already answered one of my questions. It's not statutory. Somebody selected the length, the 10-year period, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
And it could be 5 or 7 or 3, but trying to be as competitive as we can with neighboring municipalities. We went with 10.
Do our neighboring municipalities have LRTA programs like Abington right next to us, or Springfield? Or?
Abington does, and I have to double check on Springfield, but I know Abington does.
That's fine. Is there any cap on the amount of tax that can be waived?
No, it can be the full value of the improvement for the project.
So okay, yep, thanks. Do you have projections on how much this will cost, these abatements? And let me try to fill that in a little bit more. You had some examples. You had an example of a $3 million project, and they would have an abatement of about $200,000, I believe. Over time, it would decrease. Is there any projections in terms of if people do come in and take advantage of this, what the cost would be for the abatements during this period?
The one nice thing about this program is it should not cost anything other than basically if a development was going to come in anyway, despite the abatement, if it did not exist, it would cost the taxing bodies the immediate realization of that increase in assessed value. And that can be something that when a developer comes in, maybe that's something that could be negotiated between the township and that developer. But if it is something that, a developer is like, well, I'm shopping communities and I like this piece of land, but the taxes are really high and, that would hopefully make us a little bit more competitive and actually bring more income into the township and the school district at the end of the day.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you. Yeah, I'm sorry. I said cost, but I meant, you know, what would be, never mind. It's not a cost, it's a lost opportunity that diminishes over time. Two more questions for you, and thank you. Is there a projection on how much a project such as Wawa is going to be eligible for? They took, I read if I understand the ordinance, they took what is basically was an abandoned property, and they are investing a lot of money into that property. Is Wawa going to be somebody who is looking for the LRTA program?
They actually are not eligible for two reasons. First, they would be eligible upon submission of their building permit, and since this ordinance is not in effect and they did not submit an application at the time of submitting their building permit, they're moving on without it. Also, I believe our commissioners negotiated with the developer that they would not apply for any tax abatement should it be in effect at the time that they do.
Okay, so Wawa has ruled itself out from the LRTA program. They're not going to be
Correct.
coming. Okay, all right, thank you. That's going to be a big ticket. That's why I picked that one out. And lastly, this is just a curiosity. Is it a practice that once an improvement is made to a business, that it's automatically reassessed? Because we're talking about if you invest, you improve, which we all want to see. Is that something that automatically happens, and that's why people would apply for a LRTA?
It's a really good question that I have a hard time getting an answer to. So I think if something like a Wawa was coming in, yes, there would be a very strong likelihood that they would be reassessed. But if it's something a little smaller that falls under the radar, it might take the county a little longer or may not likely reassess. I'm not, we've tried to reach out to the county assessment board and never really got a great answer to that question. But I would like to say something of a large scale, yes, it would be reassessed.
Great, thank you. Those were all my questions.
Thank you, Mr. England. Mr. Cohen.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Elliott, for the presentation. So I have several comments / questions. So one of them is that at some point for smaller properties usually, but could be bigger properties, but I'll focus on smaller properties, if somebody's doing what I would call maintenance, it can be maintenance or minor renovation that really is not improving the property in a meaningful way. It could be due to different maintenance or just because something has to be refreshed or because maybe things just fell into disrepair. And they're really being more reactive than proactive. And they're certainly not building an addition and not improving the property in a meaningful way, recognizing though, of course, they are making the property nicer, so to speak. So I have a philosophical concern in that if somebody's doing what I would call maintenance of a property, where they could at least hypothetically apply for a tax abatement through a LRTA, I just have some reservations about that possibility. I'm not saying I'm against it, but I have some reservations about that. On the other end,
I can speak to that a little bit. I think because it is maintenance, it would not qualify. And if it's not improving the actual value of the property, I don't think the Board of Assessments would really increase the assessed value.
Okay.
So just because they apply for it, I don't think that means that they're really going to truly get an abatement that means anything to them.
Okay, no, that point's well taken. I do appreciate that. On the other end of the spectrum, if somebody's coming in and they're doing a big new development, then there's meaningful tax revenue lost to the school district. And of course, the school district is the big recipient, as we all know, of real estate taxes, and it's one of our primary funding sources. Whereas the township relies much less on real estate taxes and benefits much more so from business taxes, which it's the way that things are laid out in Pennsylvania. I'm not trying to obviously place blame or say one decision is better than the other, or try to obviously pit one against the other. So the township, though, does benefit more so from Florida in a sense where the school district is giving up the vast majority of the real estate tax revenue they're foregoing because of Florida, whereas the township does benefit in part because they're much less reliant, gets much less of their revenue from real estate taxes and get much more of the revenue from the school district on various business taxes. So circling back, my concern is that if there's a property above a certain threshold, I don't know what that threshold is, where somebody's coming in and they're spending meaningful money on a property and they get a 10-year abatement starting at 100% for the first 2 years, even though I do recognize that there is benefit to the township overall and the township as a government and as a body, and also to the residents of the township. And there is a benefit to the school district in the latter year, starting in year 3, and then going through year 10. And then after year 10, it winds up being revenue to the school district going forward when the abatement ends. I just foresee a possibility, at least, where there's a huge sum of money where the school district is possibly not getting it. Now, I do recognize that, but for the tax abatement, some developments might not happen. And we collectively, including the township, may or may not know when that happens or does not happen on a case-by-case basis. A developer might come in possibly and do a development without the LORDA in place, or they might decide not to do it because there is no LORDA. And we may know or we may not know if a LORDA is passed or is not passed, why a developer made those decisions. So I guess my concern and recommendation is that there be some consideration of capping the LORDA for properties where there are improvements made above a certain dollar threshold. I don't know what that threshold is, but again, that would be to benefit the school district, and as opposed to give away hundreds of thousands of dollars or possibly even millions of dollars in taxes over 10 years, we would at least get part of that during that 10-year period. So that's actually my key concern with the LORDA as currently proposed, is that there's no ceiling effectively on it, and there's no governor or limiter on it, if you will, in terms of A, the benefit to the developer, and B, the foregone revenue to the school district. So that's my major concern. And I guess another, I guess I'll largely leave it at that. I feel that 10 years is, my last point is, I think the 10 years is too generous. I know that the city of Philadelphia has done 10 years, and I realize obviously 10 years is more appealing than 5 years. But personally, I feel that 10 years is a bit much. And I think that developers would still tend to develop properties if it was a shorter time period. Of course, we don't know. So that would be my last point, where I think 5 years might be too low, but 10 years might be too much. And that will conclude my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cohen. Ms. Haywood.
Thank you, Ms. Elliott. This reminds me of the conversations about the TIF. And in many ways is really analogous to what we had decided as a board and township and the county as it related to really giving a tax break to the folks who are developing the Alkins Park House. I can't even remember now. And so we yet have not seen a dollar from that development. So that's just an aside, but I know that that's would be one of my concerns, obviously, with the LRTA, similar to Mr. Cohen's, that 10-year period of time is a period of time, at least for the first 2 years, that we're foregoing getting, taxes other than what the base tax amount is. And then over a 10-year period of time, we would have given up quite a bit of real estate taxes that we otherwise would realize. And again, I agree with Mr. Cohen. We don't know whether the LRTA would incentivize or have no impact on somebody coming in and doing the development. And I have a couple of related questions. Are you aware of any properties right now that the township is aware of that may be interested in LRTA?
At this point, no, but like I said, there is, aside from the one that has applied for the LRTA. And I honestly, I don't know the amount that could potentially be abated because they've submitted their application and the analysis hasn't been done. But it's for a property in Glenside. So it's not super large development. It's kind of somebody who came in, took a derelict property that I think had been vacant for a large number of years. So from what I understand, it was a challenging property. And it was kind of the incentive for that developer to choose Cheltenham and that property. And I think we've lucked out. It is an amazing property. It was the Dumas property in Glenside. And so that's an example of a property that really will benefit from this. I think when you're looking at some of these larger properties, the greenfield properties, maybe it isn't as much of a benefit to the community, and the developer might come in. But when you're looking at those challenging properties that, kind of get lost or passed over by people, this might be that incentive to help reutilize those properties.
Okay, I just have thank you. I have a couple more questions.
Sure.
When a property owner is applying for LRTA, who or what bodies are really evaluating that LRTA application? Is it a combination of the township, the school district, and the county, or just the township?
It's actually just the county. So they submit their application through our planning and zoning office. It's basically I think it's a one-page application that is standard pretty much throughout all municipalities to have it. And I think the planning and zoning office, verifies that the information is correct and then passes it on to the Board of Assessments in the county, and they do that analysis to determine what that improvement cost is and how it affects the assessed value. And then we get the report on it.
Okay, and once a property has been approved for LRTA, are they eligible for the 10-year tax abatement, or is there individual evaluation per LRTA application? And the reason why I ask that is kind of similar to Mr. Cohen's observation, is that there could be some properties where their increased value could net a significant disadvantage to the school district in terms of collection of taxes, versus if there was an individual evaluation, to be able to shift that 10-year period to a 5-year period, for example, that may be more advantageous to all parties, actually.
I don't believe I've seen any ordinances, and I'm not sure about the law, but I believe that each municipality picks the abatement schedule, and that is the abatement schedule. Mm-hmm. So I don't think there's the ability to pick and choose based on who we think it is. And their ability to bring it, to, I guess, not need the abatement. But I think really where it is beneficial is for our commissioners to work with that developer coming in and say, you know what, I don't think you really need that abatement. And it's also maybe something for our planning and zoning office to say, like I said, it's not something that I think is going to be very well known. So like if we're looking at a developer that's come in and, they've looked at some properties and they're on that fence, maybe we might say, here's a LRTA application. If you're interested, it might make you more likely to choose this property. But if we're looking at a big developer and they're coming in and we know that, the sky's the limit, they might not get a copy of that LRTA district. They might have to find it on their own. And that might be something that is, part of the negotiation process during the subdivision and land development.
Right. And I think to the extent that the 10-year period is not statutorily mandated, I would probably, as Mr. Cohen indicated as well, want to have further discussion about whether that should really be 10 years or some shorter period of time, closer to 5. And my last question is, if in fact someone applies for LRTA and indicates they're going to make these improvements on their property, and let's say the LRTA period is 10 years, and within that 10-year period, they don't make those improvements, but they've gotten those tax savings, can we take that money back from them? Or can we not take it back, but require them to pay what they otherwise would have been required to pay if they did not get the LRTA.
Right. I don't think it goes in. I'll have to reread that section. There are some tweaks that we made to the ordinance in this version, which basically says, if you do get a LRTA, and you're not, paying your taxes, you don't get the benefit of the LRTA. And I believe it doesn't really go in effect until the improvements are made.
Okay.
So once they get that certificate of occupancy and it's verified that those improvements have been made, then the LRTA goes into effect.
Okay, and just procedurally, is there a time frame in which the school district has to decide whether or not we agree with going forward with the LRTA and the 10-year period?
Well, I don't think there is a procedural time frame. We're in the process of kind of trying to get your buy-in and commitment to this. And I'm not sure what on your end you need to do procedurally, whether it's a resolution or just a motion of your board. But we'd like to try to do it as soon as possible. Like I said, we have a property owner that has been very anxious. They've completed their work and they've been in, and they've been getting assessed at the new rate, and that was something they had been looking forward to as part of their pro forma to have this abatement to make that property work for them. So I don't want to say, we have 2 years to do this, but we don't have a specific time frame either. One of the things that we need to do is we need an official motion or approval from the school district. We will need to advertise this ordinance and put it on our board for their approval. And once the school board and the township have approved this, then it goes to the county for their official sign off as well. And we've done the initial presentation to the county. We've had them review the ordinance, and they are also in support. They're just kind of the final approving body, which I think is what we missed the first time around.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Schultz.
Thank you. You might hear children running around in the background who are supposed to be asleep, I should add. Anyway.
But their father can't help put them to bed.
This is true. So I have a couple of questions. Thank you so much for the presentation. Some of them might be just, these are legal things that I can ask a lawyer about. But the first one is, I saw in the example that there's a clause around termination, and it specifies that the township is able to terminate the LRTA at a future date, but otherwise there's no termination date. Is that simply because this was the township's version of this document? In other words, would the school district also be able to terminate it at a future date?
I believe that the township is the one who initiates and terminates, but that doesn't mean that the school board couldn't petition the township to terminate the LRTA. And that's one thing that, maybe, in 5-10 years, we've been really successful, and we're like, we don't need to have that incentive anymore. So, we can mutually decide that we'd like to terminate this incentive, or maybe no one's used it.
Right.
And we want to terminate it as well.
So I'll just say, insofar as it sounds like the school district needs to approve this, correct? I would personally want the school to, unless it's legally not allowed, I would want the school district to also have the ability to terminate it. It just makes sense to me that as vested, 70% vested stakeholders in this, if we feel it's not working for our purposes, wouldn't have to petition another body, but we would actually have the ability to make the change.
I don't think you can terminate it on your own. So like I said, you'd have to kind of work with the township and say, we don't think this is working. We'd like the township to initiate the process.
Okay, that makes sense. I saw also agreements to your statement from board members in the know. So I also would love to understand, I think Mr. England requested this, but definitely would love to understand how this proposal compares to neighboring areas. It feels like a very important, insofar as we're trying to be competitive, that's the point of this, understanding what we're competing with. is helpful, because we're talking about numbers and numbers of years and percentages, and that would help ground it for me. I had a question about the difference between this and a TIF, and we did go through a process similar to this with the TIF, and we were able to actually, through that, it became a negotiation, and we received benefits as a community in return for the tax abatement, access to public grounds, commitment to allow the district and township to use the facilities. I believe there were terms around trying to hire Cheltenham residents first, things like that. And I wonder, is it possible for us to include, obviously it's generic with the TIF, we had a very specific developer, but include any generic things like that. If you receive alerta, you commit to something.
Yeah, so that's an interesting question. We actually considered adding some sustainability initiatives into this as part of kind of a bonus abatement schedule. And we talked about some additional requirements, and I don't think, based on the analysis that we've seen from a legal perspective, that we can really put additional requirements like that onto a TIF. But if we wanted to, we could have like a separate schedule that says, if you do these, maybe you could get more of an abatement within that. So it might be a more aggressive abatement instead of 100, and then 10% after that. Maybe it's, the first 5 years are 100% if you do more for the community. But it just was having a lot of trouble getting traction, just because so many people had different ideas. So we went right now with a very simplified TIF, so that we could get something on the books and then maybe see how things go and tweak it. The other thing is, we were looking at, our SADO and zoning ordinance have incentives as well for the developers to work in for bonuses. And then finally, there is always that TIF, which, if you ask me to explain how it works, I would fail miserably right now, because it's definitely a lot more complex. But this ordinance says that if you're going after a TIF, you don't qualify for alerta. So it's one or the other. And maybe that is something that, if we do see some of these bigger developments coming in, maybe that makes more sense for them than alerta. So there are a number of tools that we can use to help incentivize development, to hopefully find something that works best for all three taxing bodies.
Thank you. Related to the comment about termination, and this actually might be a way around what I was talking about earlier around the school district having the ability to terminate it. This would be the other way around. Right now, there is no, it explicitly says it will not have a termination date. It is just in perpetuity. Is that required, or could this ordinance, or could this actually be hey, it lasts for 5 years, as long as the applications are submitted within the next 5 years, etc. But at the end of 5 years, we would need to renew the LERTA ordinance.
That is definitely an opportunity. Yeah,
Okay.
An option. I believe there are a number. I think they might last for, I think I've seen a lot of 10-year periods.
Right. The reason that might be beneficial is a couple-fold. One, if it needs to renew, then there is a timing event that goes in. Which is beneficial potentially, that developers are incentivized to do their development sooner rather than later, because they can't necessarily count on the tax break down the line. And to that end, I understand 10 years. I wonder if 5 years, hey, you have 5 years to try to do some developments. We would like you to do it sooner rather than later. But then also it does change the dynamic of, hey, the district and the township need to both agree every 5 years, rather than it being, if one party doesn't agree, they have no ability to end it.
Okay.
I think that's my set of comments. I'm sure I'll come up with some more questions as I learn more, but thank you again for the presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Schultz. I have some of my own comments, questions. So can you, sorry, I just had dinner delivered to my desk. I would like to just say that the TIF, while we haven't seen any tax dollars from it, we know that an historic building that may have been demolished is now going to be preserved, and in the future we're going to have something in the community that we will hopefully get to derive tax benefits from in later years. But in the interim, we weren't seeing any taxes from that anyway. That's just like, so the TIF was very different in the sense that we had an applicant looking for a special abatement that was tied directly to that particular parcel, and the LRTA obviously isn't tied to a parcel in that way. The concern about an applicant taking advantage of both is so unlikely that it's not even something we need to protect against, because once they apply for the TIF, they wouldn't qualify for the LRTA, and they wouldn't be the same kind of applicant likely. The other thing I'd like to say about the TIF is they just did something, that Elkins Estate people just did something that was great for the community. They're letting a parcel of the land be used by farmer John, I may be messing the name up, but a local sustainable farming enterprise is going to be using land there to do farming that will be part of the enterprise at Elkins Estate, which is wonderful. It's a huge win for the community. In terms of the LRTA, I have a lot of deference and respect to Mr. Cohen, because this is his life work. So he should be involved in any of the negotiations that get it from the idea it currently is to fruition. But I am very interested in incentivizing development and foregoing tax revenue in the sooner years in the hopes that we get development that makes the community better, provides employment opportunities, and then gives us an opportunity to collect taxes in later years, is a better situation than one in which we don't incentivize people to come here to develop commercial properties. And that is my frame for this, that I just wanted to share with the rest of you. That's all I have, and I see no other hands raised. Are there any other questions about Ms. Elliott's presentation? Seeing none, thank you, Ms. Elliott, and we will move on.
Mr. Fishbein, there's a
You have a question?
got it.
Oh, attendee, Mr. Saribi. Can he be permitted? Yeah, there you go.
Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, thank you. First time attending one of these. It's very, very interesting, and I appreciate you allowing me to ask questions. Heard what Mr. Cohen said, and I totally agree with him. I think that 10 years is way too long. Most of the people on the school board, probably all of them, won't be around in 10 years, at least on the school board. The people who are the commissioners won't be around. Things change, as we well know, over the past 2 years. So I would strongly suggest that a negotiation be made that 10 years is just too long for you as the school board to see any benefits from this LRTA. Also, we're basically subsidizing developers to come in and develop, which we're hoping will be a good thing. But developers want to make money, so just keeping that in mind. And also, I think it was Julie who said about the checks and balances. Yes, I mean, if someone doesn't do what they're supposed to do, who's really watching this? I mean, if they're supposed to make substantial improvements and they haven't done anything in 8 years, why should they be getting the benefit of this LRTA? Also, what happens if the business starts up and they declare bankruptcy? Are they obligated to pay what they would have normally had to pay if it wasn't for the LRTA? And are we at the top of the list, or are we at the bottom and never going to see this money? I think that this is something that needs to be looked at. And Dan's suggestion that the school district have a say in this, as opposed to just the township saying, well, this is the way it is, and we'll listen to you, but you know, if we decide not to, I don't think that's such a good thing, because they're the ones that are benefiting most from this, and so therefore they should have the most to say. Thank you very much.
Mr. Saribi, if you could tell us where you live in the township. It's part of our protocol.
I live at 300 Maple Avenue in the wonderful part of Wyncote, Pennsylvania. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your comments and thank you for attending. That's the only.
Who should I follow up with for questions for future to, you know, kind of discuss your question?
You can follow up with me as chair of the finance committee, me and Dan Schultz.
Okay, great.
And Dan, you still have your hand up.
I have a follow-up question that just I realized I would like clarity on rather than assuming. If the LRTA is offsetting taxes owed on assessment change, correct? In other words, if a developer says they're going to put $1 million in and they don't, their assessment wouldn't have changed anyway. So there's not any money lost. There's no decrease in what they would have owed. It's just as though they didn't get a LRTA because it's as though they didn't do anything. So that's kind of a moot point. Am I correct on that understanding?
You are correct.
Okay.
So they will only receive it if the assessed value of the property increases.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for that observation. I had the same thought. Mr. Cohen, you've raised your hand.
Yes, thank you. And also to follow up on another point, if the word is in effect and it is done the way the ordinance reads, to my recollection, also the way it should be done, that the order would not be in place in terms of the benefit deriving to the property owner until the improvements were made. And there was some certificate of occupancy done or some other type of formal approval by the township signing off on the fact the improvements have been done. And therefore, the money would not be upfront and there would be no benefit to the property owner. The second point would be that if a property owner did go bankrupt or if they did abandon the property or sell the property, the LRTA stays with the benefit from the LRTA stays with the property. So even if something does happen and it goes awry for a variety of reasons, assuming that the improvements have occurred and that it has been approved, and let's assume that a LRTA is in place and the property owner is deriving the benefit from the LRTA and that they're getting that tax abatement for a period of whatever how many years it is, that stays with the property, irregardless of what happens to the operator of that property, the operations of the property. If the property is sold, it clearly stays with the property. Thank you.
And okay, I think we have now fully and finally exhausted the questions. Thank you, Ms. Elliott. And I turn the presentation back over to Mr. Linderman.
Okay, I'm still here.
Thanks for bearing with us.
That's okay. Okay, let's go on to the next agenda item, which is just an update on where we stand right now. I also have on this call our assistant business manager, Lou Kim. So I asked her to jump on. She will only correct me if I'm mistaken, which I often am. So, but this is a chart of where we stand right now as far as our revenues and expenses to date, as requested. This is a sad chart. This is the charter school enrollment as of the November 1st. So we compared it with what you had November 1st last year and November 1st the year before. We also put in in the bottom there what you spent totally in tuition for charter schools in 1920 and what you totally spent in tuition for charter schools last year. what those numbers up there are projected to be for this year. They're a little bit less, even though the number's a little bit higher due to the changes in students that are identified special ed and not. So in comparison to what we have budgeted. So I know that we are working on things that Dr. Scriven and Dr. Smith are working on. How do we attract these students back? So most of them are cyber. So you can see the predominantly they are cyber this year. They were predominantly cyber the year before, but it seems like about half of the ones that were in the brick and mortar have either returned or gone cyber. I don't have that level of detail. The audit, the 2020 audit is completed. We will share a copy of that with you. We should do that. I should have attached it to the agenda. We can actually upload it into the board docs for you tomorrow. And the plan for the 2020-21, we did have discussions with Mally, and they are going to continue to do the audit for this year. They actually are doing their what they call on-site work, but it's mostly Zoom this week with our business office, and they're kind of crunching the numbers, and we hope to have a much better timeline for the 2021 audit than we did for the 2020 audit, which was very late in terms of filing, but it is all done, and we're hopefully back on track. We are working on the refinancing of the 2017 bonds right now. Actually, about a month later than we could have. We were eligible to start the refunding or the refinancing last month. They actually settle in February. That's the call date of the bonds. The board did do a parameters resolution in June, giving the financial advisor and administration the authority to go forward and work on that. We are looking at tomorrow. Lou and I have two calls. One's a due diligence call with our financial advisor and our solicitor and a number of people to talk about the POS, which is the preliminary offering statement that goes out with the bonds. And then at 3:30 we have the rating call with Standard & Poor's to as they do with every new issue. They will do a rating. They'll rate our bonds. So the impact on future budgets will be. We're hoping to save in the neighborhood of $400,000 to $500,000 on this. Now that will be spread over the life of the bonds. So it's which will have a termination date in I believe 2035. Then so you're looking at about 13 or 14 years of savings that will be reduced in the budget. So probably $30,000 or $40,000. Just kind of a follow-up. We did talk about and we are working on the food service contract. And this is the timetable. We've been working with a food service consultant to help us through this timetable, and they are going to assist us in the running of the RFP. So we will be starting this like very quickly, like next week, and getting things done and making some corrections and any input that the board would like to put into the RFP that we can. It's a very standard RFP as required by the child nutrition department up in Harrisburg, but there are some things we can make adjustments to if the board would so like to kind of see with either the rehiring of the current contractor, or if we end up changing contractors with the contractor, the new one. Also in the realm of that, we're also going to do an audit RFP. So the engagement with Mally does end with the 6/30/21 audit. So we would be doing an RFP for the future audits. Usually they're a 3-year RFP. A lot of times they have options for additional 1 or 2 years that at the board's discretion they could just extend if needed. And the timeline will be Lou and I will be getting this together and sending it out to the there's a limited number of accounting firms that do audits for schools. You're probably about a half a dozen or 8 in the 5-county Philadelphia area that do school audits. We will send them all the RFP to be awarded probably at your March legislative meeting, so that we can then get them in place and an engagement letter for the 6/30/22 audit to begin. Normally, the auditors that are doing their field work this week, that field work is normally done, either end of September, early October, with some preliminary work done actually in June before the year is out. So we want to get back onto a real timeline so that the audit is timely again. Budget. We have a budget calendars on the next page. I want to talk about a little bit about building budgets, allocations, and timelines. It's kind of built into there too, and department budgets. And when I talk about department budgets, that would be all of the central office budgets and things like that. Dr. Scriven and I have had some preliminary conversations about this, and I know he is kind of laser focused on the budgets for this year too. So that's kind of exciting for a business manager, as excited as I can get. So I'm excited about it. But we will be working on the allocations for the building budgets. We will look at an allocation that's based on projected enrollment for the buildings. There are certain things that the buildings have to be responsible for buying and have to put into place for teachers and administrators and everybody to be able to operate and just provide the basic instruction. Department budgets, we want to do we're going to look at a zero-based kind of model now, which would mean the departments building their budgets, based on actual need, and not just this is what you got last year. So here's the calendar, and again, this calendar should have started about 2 months ago, but we're going to kind of compress it, into the next 2 months, so to speak, or a month and a half. So really, we're looking at preliminary budget meetings with it just shouldn't be me. It's basically me and the assistant business manager. We would go to each building, talk to them, meet with each department. The building principals, we talk about the allocation, we talk about their needs. We would start having them develop their own budgets. We need to have a more of an accountability for budgets with kind of to reside within your building principals and your department directors and people in charge of kind of district level budgets. So we're looking to get the deadline for preliminary budget information in January. That's going to be kind of pushing it. Normally that would be a good date. That's the date that most schools are used to doing it, but most schools would have started these buildings and people doing it in September or October. We're looking to present a very high level version of the preliminary budget at the finance Affairs meeting in January. So I know that's pretty early for the numbers, but we will do that. The adoption of the preliminary budget, I have it in February. It could actually go as far back as the end of April or early May legislative meeting. If you do not want to do exceptions under the Act 1 index, which I'm assuming you probably don't this year. So that's just my assumption. And it's something the board will need to talk about as far as what the budget you would like it to look like. And when I say the Act 1 index, the Act 1 index for this year is 3.4%. So that's the maximum you could raise your taxes without using any referendum exceptions, which mainly is the special ed component is about all that's left in exceptions for schools. The budget would need to be, the proposed final budget would have to be done in May. And then the adoption of the final budget would be June. So that was kind of a quick and dirty. I know there's some things you'll want to talk about, Mr. Fishbein. So
No, actually, that was all very, very helpful. It's the essence of the work we do in the Finance Committee. I thank you for all the hard work that you put into that, Mr. Linderman, and thank you for subbing in again, doing a yeoman's job. And I don't have any questions. I'm looking at the participants.
Well, first off, I will not take very much credit for a lot of this because you have a pretty good staff now in the office or the building of one. I'm not I have some really good people that I'm able to count on in my kind of I know I promised you a couple days a week, and that has kind of slacked off a little bit with some personal things I have going on with some aging parents, but I have to give a lot of thanks to Lou and her staff and for basically allowing me to focus on some things at a little higher level and having them take care of everything else.
Well, thank you to Ms. Kim and her staff as well then. Ms. Haywood.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Linderman. Just a question about the budget calendar. For the November meeting where there's going to be a building department allocations and comprehensive report released, are you contemplating that we'll get some understanding of what the building/department allocations were and whether they were spent in full or not?
Well, some of these are actually for administration to deal with. Those first two lines or first three are actually going to be for us to deal with, and we can certainly keep you up to date. We will try and get a building allocation report to you for sometime in November. I don't think it'll be for the legislative meeting, but I would like to get it to you as an information item. Ms. Kim and I are working on a building allocation report for each building. And then the preliminary budget meetings, we will have to be doing those right away. So I anticipate that most of the January finance meeting should deal with just budget and what we're doing, what we look like, some input from the board as to what you're looking at as far as your comfort level in increases. We'll have to talk about all kinds of stuff, and we've got to start building this budget from the bottom up here. And actually, we got to Dr. Scriven is an integral part of this. I mean, it's really his budget. It's just Lou and I just do it for him. So it's really the board's budget, but it's the superintendent, takes the ultimate responsibility for the budget. So we need to get him comfortable with it. And as I said, we've had some preliminary conversations with him, and we're going to continue that way. So our comprehensive report, I envision that as showing you what we project the enrollment will be in each building and what we project their budget should be, compare it to what their budget is for this year. And then the buildings will be working on the detail as to where they put, in most schools, once you've come up with an allocation that makes sense for the building principals, it's really then their responsibility and job to allocate that budget within their building as it's needed by each department, and we need to hold them more accountable for that, and not just have them kind of counting on us. They need to know what they have available, what they budgeted, how it fits in with the curriculum, and how it fits in with your strategic plan or comprehensive plan. So.
Yeah, thank you. And just kind of a corollary question is, I know we haven't typically done zero-based budgeting before, so I like the concept, and I just wanted for the public, for you to share kind of conceptually what you are looking at when you refer to zero-based budgeting.
Yeah, and you can't really zero-based budget the whole school budget. I mean, it doesn't work that way. It's a great buzzword, but you can zero-based budget certain departments. There are certain things we start at zero, then there are things that are recurring that, okay, we have to budget for that. So let me just pick on facilities, because hopefully they jumped off the Zoom call. You got utility bills, you've got to buy supplies for the custodial staff to clean. So those are things that will start to build. Now, there are also other needs that will need to be done. There's minor maintenance projects, and how do they fall within the budget, and how can that budget support some of the minor maintenance projects that don't fall into the capital realm, where we're taking them out of the capital project fund. Other departments like pick on technology too. Well, technology, again, if you start at zero, there are certain things that they have to buy. They're going to have to buy. They have to budget for our internet provider. They have to budget for the computers for the kids. There's a lot of things they have to do. But then, what are the next things that they're going to build onto their budget with, and how will that focus into what your plan is? And again, we've got to be conscious that it is not an endless pot of money. It is we are kind of stewards of the taxpayers' money, and we got to do the best we can to provide the best education we can, and not, we don't want to short either the taxpayers or the kids. So building budgets will have each principal's budget will be a little more based on an allocation, based on the number of students they have. There are certain items that they will budget for, replacement curriculum material that's not in a curriculum revamping cycle and things like that, or minor equipment replacement, some furniture and equipment that's not in a major replacement. So it's cool to say zero-based budgeting, but it's really not. A school can't start at zero. First off, I mean, even the budget that Lou and I will put together, you got debt service. That's not going anywhere. I can't say we have zero. You're going to have to pay your mortgage payment next year, no matter what. So.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify that, because I know that people use that term differently, and I just wanted to understand conceptually from your point of view.
It's really budgeting, and there are certain things that you have to budget for. Kind of, it's the zero will be the next level of things, or the extra things, or the the revisions to things that they're looking for.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Haywood. Mr. Cohen, you were next.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Linderman. My first is you requested comments about the food service, and I mentioned last month, I believe it was, about sustainability, especially about things like biodegradable plates and utensils. If we can try to factor that in, I would personally be in favor of that into the RFP. This second aspect, to pivot somewhat, is around cyber charter schools. And if somebody can remind me, I'm unclear about what we currently offer as a school district. Do we offer a cyber charter as a school district or a cyber charter like option? I believe at one point we did. I'm not sure if we do so now. And if we do it, I'm not sure if and how we market such an option to the community. Not to get into a discussion or in any way extol the virtues of cyber charter, but obviously if we can offer or do offer an option, then we can keep those students in-house and provide them a good education and also derive some financial benefits, not have the negative financial downside as well. So I guess it's a question for whoever can answer that from the administration. Again, do we currently offer a cyber charter like option that we offer through somebody that we contract with? Or if not, is this something we can consider? And if we do offer one, what are we doing about marketing and getting the word out to the community? Thank you.
So we do not option, something that we could take a look into and explore.
Okay, thank you. I personally welcome that as an option. I don't certainly want to do something that's going to wind up having negative ramifications to the school district, but as one school board member, I think it's something that considers at least looking into. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cohen.
Mr. Fishburne, that's all. Thank you.
Okay, I wasn't sure if you were done, but now, thank you. Mr. Schultz.
Thank you. I had first, it just bears giving a +1 to the sustainability input. And in particular, yes, we use a lot of styrofoam, and I would love for us to formally ban styrofoam in our RFP, if that's possible, or at least better understand what's possible and what's not. To that end, actually, my question, Mr. Linderman, is you mentioned that there's some flex, that a lot of the RFP is locked in and that there's some flexibility. Could you don't have to go too deep, but what is the nature of the flexibility that we actually have in a food RFP?
Well, things like sustainability, things like offering a breakfast program, things like, offering, what kind of a la carte you offer to different schools. So, it's,
Okay.
That's a little bit, the template really is to make sure we comply with the National School Lunch Program and things like that. So,
okay. Thank you. So so sustainability is one aspect, and then the other question is, I believe the idea of soliciting input from the Wellness Committee from a more nutritional perspective was floated. I was curious if that is realistic or desired, or if that's not if that, after looking at it, isn't the nature of the Wellness Committee. Have we done that, or are we planning to do that?
I think it's a great idea. It is good to do from the wellness, to get input from the Wellness Committee. Again, where I came from at Great Valley, we had a couple times a month, and especially in the elementary schools and a little bit in the middle school, we used the Chester County Food Bank to offer up some what I'll call unique fruits and vegetables to try and get the students to try new types of things. And one of the things you could also add into I believe you can add into the RFP is kind of a requirement for whoever you get to do this, that they work with your student groups to make sure you can do all you want and serve what you think they want, but unless you get input from your consumer, which are your kids from the age of 5 to 18, you may not be able to be what I'll call sustainable financially. So you want to make sure you have the right, you offer the right things, plus getting the input from student groups. And I would say even into your elementary schools, it also adds for a little more excitement by the students and a little more buy-in by them. So, when you do have, although I have yet to see a kid want Brussels sprouts, but I like them, you may get them to do some, what I call them unique vegetables and fruits, stuff that you just would never really see. And it got them excited. Other things you could look at is, I don't know, a lot of schools in the area started kind of gardening projects at their schools where the cafeterias, grew things and actually used them in the production. Not a lot. It doesn't really make a thing, but it's another learning tool when you're growing your own tomatoes or growing your own basil or cilantro. You can make your own salsa and stuff like that. So I know there's a number of schools that do kind of garden projects. Don't know your facilities enough to know whether you even have, a carve out of a quarter acre or half acre at a couple buildings that you could do that. But things like that, I do agree. The wellness committee is probably a good point, but you may expand that in the RFP, not for the RFP, but you may expand the provider to say, look, we want you to meet with the student council groups or the whatever.
That makes sense. So and that actually was going to be my last question, but I would love clarification on that process point. I understand there's a difference between before the RFP and what's written down in the RFP itself, and what is, I don't know if negotiated is the right word, but in terms of details being nailed down either during or after the bidding process. And so if there are members of the public who have opinions about whether it's nutrition or sustainability, et cetera, is the right time for them to be engaged now, or is the right time for them to try to be engaged after the RFP is out? I think it's now, but let me confirm. Let me talk to the consultant we're using that is helping me through this, I think they'll want to have, especially any input from the public can't hurt. Okay, so to that end, in terms of the board input, if board members have as individuals have input, is the right approach for maybe Joel and I to solicit that feedback? Folks could email us and then we could collate that and pass that along to you. Is that a reasonable process?
Yeah, okay. That's reasonable. And we could even, see about, putting a thing on the webpage, like if you want to, comments toward the service, whatever. I will talk to Barb tomorrow and see, what she thinks the best process is. But I think I know that in other places that she's worked with, they've used everything from the wellness committee to student council to working with the local food.
Sure.
So
okay, thank you. And I'll just give a plug for Brussels sprouts. I believe they have been engineered in the past 15 to 20 years to actually be way less bitter and more delicious. So for those of a certain generation, maybe not millennial, give it another try. All right, bye.
I don't think that was meant in any way as a slight to Ms. Henry. I'm quite sure of it. Mr. Burdell Williams, you had your hand up, but it's down.
Correct. It was only the +1 Brussels sprouts, but additionally, actually the +1, the sustainability efforts, that is not, but from the perspective of not just one board member, we all have a responsibility via the resolution that we adopted earlier this year, to focus on sustainability efforts in any way possible. And I think this is a great way as discussed previously by my colleagues, for us to, understand what opportunities exist there. There are many. So just again, interested for what we do with that conversation. And, from a sustainability perspective, I'd like that to be a priority as a part of the RFP, as opposed to, an add-on to something that we can do later. I think there's benefit from someone out there who has, a better approach to how we manage waste, but not just styrofoam, to Mr. Schultz's point, but food waste as well. I could share a very cool story about a group of college students who are doing some really cool things with food waste. But I, again, welcome any of that as a part of the conversation leading up to the RFP, as a part of our efforts moving forward from a sustainability perspective.
Thank you, Mr. Riddell Williams. And it seems to me that given the level of interest that we just heard, and that I think is shared but unexpressed by other board members, that we should, in a future financial affairs meeting, have the consultant, report out the RFPs that are coming in, the process, how we can let our voice be heard early rather than later, so that when it comes time to actually pick the provider, we have gotten a proposal that will meet our desires and needs. So
Good idea.
okay.
And I'm reading these recipes for Brussels sprouts, and now I'm like a little bit hungry.
I have my dinner that's been sitting here, but I've been running a meeting, so I haven't been able to eat it. So I topped you there. Seeing no hands raised by board members and none by participants who are attending, I think we've reached the end of our presentation and agenda tonight, and I'll ask for a motion to adjourn.
So move, Charles Riddell Williams.
Do I have a second?
Second, Bill England.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Hearing none, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.